Welcome to Lighten the Legal Career Path. I'm your host, Erica Moore-Burton. Whether you're a new attorney looking for inspiration or guidance, or further along in your career, wondering how to get to the next level, or someone that's just simply curious about the legal world, you're in the right place. We'll be talking to female and BIPOC attorneys not only about their remarkable stories of success, but the challenges they've faced along the way, the lessons they've learned, and their valuable insights about their career and the road ahead. Let's dive into today's conversation.
Hey everyone, my name is Sabrina Narain. I'm a managing partner at LTL Attorneys. We're a trial firm based out of downtown Los Angeles.
So let's dive into today's conversation. Welcome, Sabrina. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have a great conversation about this. So many things I want to dive into with you. So first of all, let's just talk about, you've had a very successful career to date, right? And I want us to sort of talk about your particular practice area, what that looks like day to day, and tell us what you enjoy about it and, what you don't like about it maybe as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And my answer of what I enjoy about it and what I don't enjoy about it is the same answer.
Okay.
I've always said the one thing I loved about my job, but I also hate about my job, is that all of my clients are attorneys. So
right.
I'm a corporate litigator. I handle civil trials here in California on behalf of corporations. Most of my practice is in the consumer litigation space, but I've also handled a lot of litigation in other spaces, such as general liability, employment litigation, and things like that. Also business disputes. But my day to day is basically living and breathing corporate work and what it's like to run a corporation like that, and what its restrictions are, what its abilities are, and really communicating that to juries as for them to come to a fair verdict. So in a nutshell, I'm just a a lawyer that works a lot.
Yeah,
And I am a managing partner of a firm called LTL Attorneys in downtown LA, where we specialize in a variety of things, as well as consumer litigation, including complex litigation, IP, employment, and things like that.
Excellent. Wonderful. So let's cast your mind back to the early days of your career, right? And when you first started practicing law. Can you tell us about some of the, I always say, I just said it this week on another recording, look, the path to success is never a straight line, right? It's never a straight line from here to here going up. It's kind of like goes up and down, and there are some flat moments and there are some dips and the highs. Tell us about some of the challenges early in your career.
I think that's a great question, because when I first started practicing law, I always heard about a lot of stigma with women in the industry, minority women in the industry. I'm half Puerto Rican, half Indian, from New York. I come from a very diverse culture and background. And I kind of always assumed, well, that stuff's not going to apply to me, right? Like back then it was 2011 when I started in law school. But back then I used to think, well, no, I mean, society is pretty progressive and, everybody's very aware. And you would be surprised how subtle it still exists, even if it's not so much in your face anymore, right? So I felt like I dealt with a lot of issues of coming into my own personality as a litigator, really always trying to appease a particular personality of what I thought a lawyer really was. I think people really have this conception, right, of attorneys or doctors or really kind of any professional position, that they're almost like not normal people, right? Like they're robots, and everybody is just a person, right? Even judges, they're just people. And it took me a long time to really understand that it's okay to be me. I feel like I got a lot of pushback, really in all areas, but particularly with in a male-dominated society, about how aggressive I was. I personally am a little bit of a sailor when it comes to my work ethic, and always kind of being told, well, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be presenting yourself in a different way.
Who was telling you that, by the way? Who was telling you that, or was it society at large? You just had that message?
people in law school,
Okay.
professors, people that I worked with. Then it went into partners of firms and bosses of law firms. No, it really kind of was always kind of relevant in
Hmm.
their mind. And, to an extent, I think I learned from that. I learned to use those particular aspects of my personality to my benefit.
Hmm.
And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, right? As you're growing and understanding how to use your what you can actually bring to the table.
Hmm.
But then as I became more progressed in my career and I started surrounding myself with people who were a lot more like me,
Hmm.
it became easier to just set into my own personality. And then
Right.
I learned that once I could set into that personality, I became a better lawyer. I became a better litigator. I became a better trial attorney because I
Right.
was much more genuine in the way that I communicated.
Yeah, you were more authentic, you were more yourself, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's I was talking to another guest on a show, and she was saying, at the beginning of her career she would come in with a suit on, and there's the suit that you had to wear. I remember earlier in my career I used to wear my hair a certain way, and then after a certain point I'm like, this isn't me, like this is not how I wear my hair. I want to have my fro, I want to have my braids, I want to have my faux locks, whatever it is. I got to bring myself. And the minute that you're authentic, that seems to be the moment that things take off for you. Did you find that?
Absolutely.
That was when you found that, when you were just like, okay, I'm just going to be myself.
Absolutely. Yep. And it took me 3 law firms to get there.
Yeah,
So, you know,
absolutely. Yeah,
and
it took me three firms to get there as well, right? It takes a while. So thinking about that, and knowing that a lot of our listeners might be going through that right now, going through that period of time where they're at a firm, maybe don't feel like they're bringing themselves to the role. What would you say to them?
I would say, don't give up on yourself, particularly women. Don't put yourself in the box that everybody wants you to be in. Be in your own box, set your own rules, set your own boundaries, understand what works for you. And if you're at a place where that's not supported, move
Hmm.
on.
Yeah,
Like for me, a lot of people in this generation that I'm seeing with the younger attorneys, they move around a lot because of pay.
yeah,
For me, I was moving around a lot because I really was trying to find a home.
right. The culture.
Um, and I think that when you've given your all, like in law, right, where you've taken the bar exam or any other professional job that requires you to go through intense training,
Hmm.
yes, the money is important, but if you're not happy, there's no amount of money that's going to make you happy,
Right,
right? You could go to a big law firm and make $400,000 as a young lawyer, but you might not be very happy because you're just one of a number, right?
right.
So look for that space. And the other piece of advice I would give, especially women, is that it exists. I know it feels like it doesn't, but it definitely exists.
It
It's
does.
just that you've got to put the time in to make sure you're communicating what you need, right? When you
Right.
interview with a firm, you interview with the firm because they want you, not the other way around.
Right. No, absolutely. And that's really great advice. We did a little segment on that, on how to really find out about the culture of the firm. Like having an interview, that's one thing, right? Having an interview with a partner, you can get the information about the actual work, but really finding out about the culture is paramount as well, because I think there's a statistic out there that says, anything over your level of happiness doesn't go up after like $75,000. You know that stat? Have you heard about that stat?
Yep.
Right. So you could be making 200,000, 3, 4, 5, and yet still your happiness level, once you've had the initial high, great, I'm making 360 or 400. After 3 months, your level of happiness is going to be still the same as it was before. So finding that place, finding that home is really important. What tips can you give for, as people are changing roles, as to find out about, the firm and finding out about the culture? We often give our advice, but what advice would you give to somebody, looking right now and really trying to find out about culture, aside from a website, right?
Call people. I've always appreciated candidates that want to talk to other employees. Do your research, and it's not limited to just the people that work there. Ask around to your colleagues. Do you know anything about this firm or this employer or this person? It's a small community.
Yeah.
LinkedIn is huge. Use LinkedIn, because that will help you have a base and a network that you can rely on one day when you need something or you have questions. And then, of course, as I reiterated, you have to communicate what it is that you want and what you're seeking. When things are not an option, they're not an option.
Right.
There has to be a really big give for you to give up, something that's really important to you. And maybe it exists, right? I'm not saying don't explore it, but you really definitely need to communicate what you want. And employers are very receptive to that. I would really encourage everyone to be more confident in interviews and almost, very strict with yourself,
Right.
because that is the relationship that you're creating at the very beginning, is that you know what you want. And then when that culture starts to change, because that happens, I've been through that a few times, where you go somewhere and at one point it was one way and then leadership comes in and then it's different, right?
Mhm.
And at least everybody's on the same page about what you communicated when you got there, right?
Yeah.
And if
That's great
if there
advice.
you
Yeah.
are going through those changes, you just have to recognize them and do what is best for yourself.
Absolutely. This show is sponsored by Round Hill Legal Search. For the past 10 years, Round Hill Search has been placing attorneys of all levels with our trusted clients, from AmLaw 100 firms to the solo practitioner. Visit us at roundhillsearch.com for more information, to find great legal talent, or to step into your next legal role. How have you known in the past, you've been at a few firms and you said it took you 3 firms, when have you known that it was time for you to move on? Like, at what point was it? Was it just a recruiter calling you? Was it, you thinking, you know what, I need to move on because I'm not getting what I need at this firm?
Well, I'll kind of go through, I guess, my thought process at the 3 firms. The first one, I was pretty young. I learned a lot. I really liked it. It was more boutique. For me, it really wasn't a place that I could grow. And that's a common theme in all
Mm-hmm.
of my decision making, is my ability to grow. And I was working in an environment that was a little more family based,
Mm-hmm.
which can make it difficult for somebody like me who really wants to go in and make a difference and change things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up transitioning over to a little bit of a bigger firm, because I thought that
Okay.
I would have more opportunity for that. I would say it was about mid-size.
Okay.
From there, I kind of ran into a similar issue with the family thing, just not as
Uh-huh.
much on a big scale as the first place. And that kind of caused me to reach a ceiling at some point. I was doing a lot of really complex litigation tasks that were
Mm-hmm.
not assigned to other associates. And, particularly for my age group, I was doing pretty well at some of it.
Mm-hmm.
I was basically doing everything but the actual trial.
Ah.
So yeah, when I got to the actual trial part, there was a lot of contemplation about who would be trying these cases. And I was working with somebody who, is pretty close to retirement too. And I really, really, really loved working with him.
Mm-hmm.
And, all of those things kind of at once, like the inability to get trial work, the fact
Mm-hmm.
that the person that I was working with would maybe no longer be there, and then realizing that there wasn't as much of a growth opportunity at a bigger firm than I actually thought.
Got it. Got it.
So I moved on from there,
Mm-hmm.
completely on my, own thoughts process of I need to move on. And
Mm-hmm.
I started applying to different places on ads and stuff. And I had a couple of offers that were pending with really big firms, nationwide firms that had offices in every single state. And kind of in my mind, I was thinking, okay, the bigger I go, the more I can grow. And I'll tell you,
Mm.
that's not true.
That's not
Um,
true, right?
it's not
Right.
true. And I've learned that now, right? But that
Yeah.
was my mindset then. And I was coming from a really small underdog law school. I went to Western
Mm-hmm.
State in Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a fantastic school. But you're competing with the UCLAs and the USCs,
Absolutely.
and you're
USC's,
competing
yeah.
with, yep, all of these big schools, particularly in the LA region.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, I got a phone call from a girlfriend
Mm-hmm.
who said, "Hey, there's a really good opportunity for you at a firm in downtown LA. It's
Mm-hmm.
minority owned. It's growing, and I think it would be a really good spot for you, taking over basically the same work that I was doing at my last firm. So it was a really good fit." And I'm going to tell you this. little part of the story because I think it's really important, and I try to reiterate this a lot to my mentees. I had a pretty good offer at a high end firm,
Mm-hmm.
and I had 10 days to accept that offer according to the offer letter.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I had a mentor who was in recruiting who said to me, wait until the 10th day to accept the offer. And I said, you are crazy. I'm not going to
Right.
do that. I want this. I want out of this other firm. It's more money. I cannot believe that somebody like me from Western State got an offer like this. So I take her advice
Mm-hmm.
and I wait till the end.
The
On
10th
day
day.
Yep, on day 8 out of 10 is when I got the call from the girlfriend saying, I really think this would be a better fit for you. So I reached out to this firm and I sent my resume, no response. I'm calling, and it's just they were inundated. It wasn't
Yeah.
anything of lack of interest. And that's the other thing. Go after it. Like if you're not hearing back,
Yeah.
it's
Follow
not
up,
because they
right?
don't like you. Yeah, it's just that
Yeah.
we're all really, 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 really busy and we get a
Right.
lot of emails. And it worked out. I said, I have this offer that's expiring in 2 days, so we need to move very quickly here. I don't have a lot of time. And I got a much better offer at this
Wonderful.
other
That's
place that
great.
was smaller. We had about 5 or 6 attorneys at that firm when I started. And by the time I left, we grew to about 40 attorneys. So I gained this wealth of knowledge that I really wasn't thinking that I needed, right? I was thinking,
Right.
okay, if I go in a big law is going to get me there. But it was the actual opposite. It was the complete opposite. I went boutique,
Mm-hmm.
and then that establishment gave me a path for actual growth.
Right.
And that's where I ended up really finding myself. We did a lot of great work together at the firm. And then from there on, even though at that point I found myself,
Mm-hmm.
I still reached a ceiling because once you
Right.
find yourself, then you're going to go up, and then you're going to find yourself again, and then you're going to
And
go
then you're
up
going to go
even
to the next
further.
level.
Yep.
Yep.
And that's exactly right. And that's what happened. And it's perfectly normal. I know it's uncomfortable, to be moving around, especially when you've built relationships and stuff like that. But in the end, you have to do what is best for you.
Right. Right.
And I can tell that the move from my last place into my current firm, LTL, has been just really life changing for me personally.
Got it.
Not necessarily about my career, how much money I'm making, or my title, or anything like that. It's just personally.
Right.
I just feel that I have now refound myself, and I didn't really think I needed to do that.
Got
So
it.
you just got to stick with it. You got to fight for what you want, and you'll do better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something to be said for really sitting with yourself and gaining clarity on what you want as well. Because sometimes you're going so fast, you don't stop to sit and think, okay, what do I want and what do I need at this point? I think there's this, this thing about big law, and people think, okay, I'm going to go to big law, I'm going to get the name and I'm going to get the experience, but that's not always going to be your experience. I want to quickly go back to that and talk about that a little bit. When we talk to some of our applicants about, they're at a crossroads, go to big law or go to a boutique. I always recommend the boutique personally, because I'm always saying you're going to get so much great experience at the boutique, less bureaucracy, more chances for opportunity. You're going to be able to take those depositions. You're going to be able to go to trial. Whereas at these larger firms, yes, you've got the name on your resume, which might open other doors. But what do you want? Do you want the name, or do you want the actual experience? Do you want to be a better lawyer? So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. So I was taking about every single type of deposition that you can imagine in my cases by the time I was leaving the second firm. And
Mm-hmm.
when I had that offer for the nationwide firm, he was very honest with me. Oh, the clients want me to take the plaintiff depositions. The clients want me to handle the corporate representative depositions. And it just didn't feel right. It really kind of felt like I was just looking for a place to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I really am humbled by the experience of what I went through with the advice of that mentor, because I would have not been happy. There's
Right.
just no way that I would have been happy at a place like that. And I went into the next firm, communicating, I can do all of this and I'm going to do all of this. And if that's not
Right.
an option for you, then that's not going to work.
Right.
So I do think there's a lot to be said about boutique work. I also think there's a lot to be said about big law. And it really just kind of depends on your personality, really, too.
Mm-hmm.
What you like, what you don't like. There's a lot of stability in it. But, the boutique stuff, it's really, especially when you're coming from underdog schools, you'll
Right.
feel more comfortable there because you're used to coming from a smaller environment where everybody knows who you are. You're not just a number. But there's a lot of other give and take with that. Sometimes there's not as much opportunity for pay. I mean, like some of these big firms are just paying like outrageous
Yeah.
amounts of money to young attorneys, and that's great, but we want them to be happy, right? We want them to feel like they've lived a fulfilling career as a litigator or a trial attorney
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience in the courtroom as well? Like the first time you went to court and how you've grown over the years in your role as a trial lawyer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Any stories as well about your court life?
man, the first time I ever went to court, it was for a case management conference. And if anybody listening knows what a CMC is, it's like the most basic hearing of the entire case where they just give you a trial date and they ask you if you need anything else. And I remember telling my boss that I was going to win the CMC because I had like no idea what was going on.
And he was like, "There's nothing to win, Sabrina."
Exactly.
Right.
He was just everybody was just ragging on me. I did a couple criminal defense court appearances a little bit later in my career after that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very similar. Like the police officers, the sheriffs that were working there were like, "Do you know what you're doing?" I'm like, "Not really."
But I'm gonna go with it.
But you know what? People appreciate that. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
appreciate the hustle and they appreciate, you just showing up in the first
Right.
place. And this, mind you, this is all pre-COVID. This is
Right.
not post-COVID world of Zooms and calling in a court on motions. We had court call, but it was really reserved for small hearings and they had to be really far away. Other than that, you were getting in your car and you were driving.
Right.
And there was no ifs, ands, or buts about that. There was no real big option to be remote. So I really gained a lot of experience in the courtroom early because
Mm-hmm.
I was required to physically go there all of the time. And then I started doing high volume litigation where, I was at a firm that handled thousands of cases. So then
Mm-hmm.
I was going to court sometimes twice a day, three
Oh
times,
wow.
4 times a day. Yeah, it was really, really, really hectic. But I feel like it taught me to be comfortable in a courtroom. It taught me to be comfortable with the people who work there, how it operates. And even now that post COVID has kicked in and everything's
Mm-hmm.
remote, when I go back to the courthouse and I see clerks that have known me since I was really young,
Yeah.
they are so happy to see me. They give me a big
Right.
hug. If they see that I have a trial coming in, they're so excited about it. It's like those kinds of relationships, human interactions are so necessary for you to be
Yes.
comfortable for what you need. If the courtroom staff doesn't like you, your
Yeah.
trial is going to be hell and you're not going to
Right.
have any help. And if you're in a pinch, they're not going to help you. And you don't even talk to the courtroom clerk when you call in on Zoom other than giving them your name.
Oh
That's not
wow.
going to get you there, right? Like
Yeah.
you got
Yeah.
to really go in there, ask people how they're doing, crack a joke here and there, be your own personality.
Mm-hmm. So have you? So now that most of your trials and appearances are mostly by Zoom now, or what percentage would you say Zoom versus other in
All
person?
trials are in person.
Okay.
Yeah, there's very, very, very few jurisdictions that are doing remote trials, if any, anymore in
Yeah.
2024. But most court appearances are remote, and there's a lot of judges that prefer remote. So what I do is if there is a hearing on calendar, I look for the judge's courtroom rules, or I call the clerk and I ask if there's a preference, and I do what the preference is
Got it.
because
Okay.
that is going to always show that you've done your due diligence to understand what this judge needs.
Right. Got it. Did you through the pandemic? I thought my understanding was that most of the trials and everything were just deferred to post pandemic because I don't know that any trials took place on Zoom. That would be odd, right?
Yeah, I did one in another administrative jurisdiction that was
Uh-huh.
through Zoom, but almost 100% of them are in person. I mean, I've done trials with full N95 masks on for the duration of the whole trial. So
Wow.
because it's hard with juries.
Yeah, exactly. That was going to be my
Yeah.
next question about with the jury trials. How tell us a little bit about your experiences with any difficult juries, even during the voir dire process and everything. Any courtroom stories about that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a corporate litigator, so I'm already starting with like my two legs cut off. So,
Right.
yes. It can be a little bit challenging, but in the end, corporations are run by humans,
Hmm.
and they're not perfect. We're not perfect. Plaintiffs are not perfect, and I that is the story that I communicate. What is my client all about? And
Right.
I get try to get them to a place where they can understand it from a very very basic, small layperson level, right? Not I don't try to overwhelm them with acronyms and statistics and things like
Right.
that. It's just really, for the most part, most corporations are pretty simple.
Right.
I think what we struggle with jury selection and in jury trials is jurors assume that they are not,
Hmm.
right? They assume that they have super capabilities to kind of know everything. And I work with worldwide corporations. They are not like that. They're as
Right.
old school as you
Right.
can get sometimes. Yeah. So, dealing with the belief that my clients can do anything in their power,
Hmm.
it's just not true. That might be true in other aspects. And the
Right.
kind of stuff I do, it's just not true.
Right. So you have
I've
to come in and dispel all those myths first of all. To let's just talk about it at a basic human level.
Yeah, I've represented high profile politicians and stuff like that in trials too. That can be very challenging, especially if they're a local
Hmm.
politician. And jury selection tends to take a little bit longer, but with time and the right questioning, you will find the right jury for you. And you would also be surprised how much jurors don't know. Like,
Hmm.
especially when I started doing the more high profile stuff, I kind of assumed, oh my God, everything is against me.
Right.
But you kind of learn that people live, lives that benefit themselves, and that's the way
Right.
it should be, right?
Right.
People are not living and breathing drama for the most part. I know it kind of
Right.
feels like it right now, but really, the normal person is not, and you really have to like dig into that, right? Understand who they are, where their priorities lie, and just kind of go from there. And
Love it.
don't underestimate people either.
If you're enjoying today's conversation, please share with another attorney in your network and send us your questions to podcast@roundhillsearch.com. Right. So you've worked with some huge auto manufacturing companies. Ford, Mercedes are some of the clients that you work with. How have you been able to sort of cultivate and grow that business over the years? Because I think that's a subject that I'm bringing up over and over again because I think it's really important for younger lawyers to understand the importance of developing business early in their careers. It doesn't mean that you're going to come out of the gates with this big client, but you've got to nurture relationships. So when the time is right for you to start, bringing in the business to the firm or going on, bringing pitch meetings to the firm to say, can we go and pitch for this business, that you're ready and you have those relationships in place. So talk to us about your business development journey.
Absolutely. So I have been on a business development journey since the day I got licensed. And Lord knows sometimes I may or may not have had the, training in these particular areas of law of the business that I was going after, but I knew of my abilities to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my confidence, really it created a path for me to be able to start business development early. I started with what I knew,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would add levels to that of things I didn't know, and I would definitely challenge myself. So I got this piece of advice once from somebody that I met later in my career that said, you really want to try to avoid, and there's nothing wrong with it if you are, but if you want to make money, right? If you want to really make money in the legal industry, because let's be clear, there's 1,000 other things that you can do. You make a lot more money and be a lot
Right.
less stressed out than this job, right? So there's no doubt about that. But if you really want to make money, right, you cannot be a 10, 15, 20-year lawyer bouncing around from firm to firm with no book of business. It's
Right.
just the unfortunate way of the way the law works.
Mm-hmm.
My parents, none of them are in legal at all. And they called me once and was like, oh, so and so is going to be making 1.5 million at his firm. And I said, well, it's because he probably has a pretty hefty book of business, right?
Right.
Like, there's no law
There's no
firm
light on the
that
planet.
that is just paying you a salary of $1.5 million. That's not how
Right.
that works. The
Right.
lawyers that get to that level have a book of business.
Right.
You will cap out on your salary and
Mm-hmm.
your bonuses and, maybe even your commission.
Mm-hmm.
So you really want to take business development serious earlier on and
Mm-hmm.
develop those skills. For me, it was smaller businesses.
Right.
It was mom and pop shops. I bartended, I was a manager of a restaurant. I worked every position in a restaurant in the front of the house. So I started with restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
And I would pitch
That
different,
was smart.
whatever business litigation work they had. Why? Because I understood restaurants, right?
Right.
My first client was the restaurant that I worked at while I was in law school. I became their
Mm-hmm.
in-house counsel. And I did a lot of work for them. And I could do it because I understood the restaurant industry. The
Right.
law was something I just learned on top of that.
Got
You're
it.
not going to learn all those areas of law while you're in law school. That's not the way law school works. It's only meant for
Mm-hmm.
you to pass the bar exam. So start with what you know,
Mm-hmm.
but don't be afraid to go after what you don't know.
Absolutely.
I started at my third firm when we were much smaller. I was doing a little bit of criminal defense stuff. I'd get friends I would call with, small misdemeanor cases, DUIs, things like that. And I didn't know what I was doing. I still took the case. I talked it over with the managing partners, of course. They gave me some guidance. And then I'd go sit in, when you go criminal appearances, you sit in the jury box and wait for your case to be called. I would just sit there and make friends with everybody in the jury box. And I would ask them, what do I do next? And what's this form about? I'd figure it out literally when I got there.
As you were going. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
So just challenge yourself. I mean, if you've gone through law school, you can
Mm-hmm.
handle just about anything.
Right.
Don't underestimate your abilities in bringing in business. And then what I've learned with the business development stuff over time is the more you are of yourself, like when you act like yourself, you are the person that you want to be, your personality is shining,
Mm-hmm.
the business will start coming in. Because like clients, like my clients, right? They are lawyers. That's why I said at the very beginning, I love and hate my job because all my clients are lawyers, right? I can't get anything over them.
Right.
It is
They
not
want to know every detail. Yes. Yeah.
it is not the mom and pop shop that I
Yeah.
started with 10 years ago, right? It is
Right.
very serious, extremely talented people. And what I learned is that these people are just people, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
people who are just as stressed out as me, have the same kind of work on their plate, if not worse. And sometimes they just want to go out for a drink. Sometimes they just
Right.
want to, go out to dinner and talk about their personal lives and their kids and what's going on, in their lives and their hobbies. Or, maybe there's like a book club or something that,
Mm-hmm.
you guys could both have a mutual interest in. It could be anything,
Anything. Anything.
anything. But
And there's that common adage that says, people do business with people that they like, right? That's how business comes around. You got to be that likable person. You got to share your interests basically in order to for people to like you, to obviously do business with you as well. How about, like, if somebody's at a firm where, and I hear this a lot, they can't bring in the business because the client's not big enough for their current firm to handle. So they may have all this whole network, all these referrals for business. But we just had a call the other day from a law firm downtown, and we have an attorney saying, look, I could bring in about $300,000 worth of business, but to my firm that's nothing. That's small potatoes. What do I do?
mhm.
Any insight on that?
I think that you could maybe work through that and stay at that firm, or maybe if there's other factors that are doubting whether it's the right place for you, maybe it's time to move on, right?
Right.
So there's two solutions to either one. The second one is fairly easy.
Yeah.
Recognize that this is not going to work. Very similar thing happened to me at one of my firms earlier on, where I said I wanted to bring in business when I interviewed. Don't worry about it. That's great. We
Hmm.
appreciate rainmakers. Bringing in the clients, and or at least bringing prospective clients in.
Right.
And then I'm being told, no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. I actually had
Hmm.
one client that agreed to sign the retainer, but had not yet signed it, and I had been running everything through the firm already, before I obviously sent the retainer. And then the firm told me to call them and said that we weren't going to go with them. And that
Oh,
client never called me back. And I was really upset about it.
oh my goodness.
That was another linchpin for me of why I ended up leaving that
Right.
place, because I knew that I wanted to grow a book, and it was obvious that it wasn't the right thing for me there. So, that is kind of the easier way. The second option is to try to dig deep into that, right? There's something to be said about being able to network
Hmm.
and really being able to build connections. And so much of that has nothing to do with you going up to them and asking, hey, can I do work for you? Right? It
Mm.
has everything to do with you setting a goal of who you want to work with, and
Hmm.
then setting smaller steps to achieve smaller goals, right? I'm going to go to lunch with this particular prospective client and just get to know them. And, maybe we have a mutual friend and I'll invite that person. And maybe, I'm just kind of creating an environment where I'm creating the networking for me. Where do you do that with? With your current clients,
Hmm.
right? Like, you have to start with the work that you're doing. I'm
Right.
in no way advocating that you go taking clients from a firm or anything like that. That's something for the employee to deal with and
Right.
whatever the arrangements are, right? But start with the work that you have, right?
Right.
Cultivate those relationships, because let's say you have space in like slip and fall work, for
Hmm.
example, and you cultivate a relationship with this particular client of the firm that you're working with. Well, over time, that client is going to talk to other people about you, and they're going to
Hmm.
say, hey, I know this person, Sabrina Narain. They're doing good work for me, because all these in-house attorneys talk to each other when there's a need, and they say, I
Absolutely.
need more law firms. They talk to each other, right?
Right.
And you just really have to get the domino effect going.
Hmm.
And it's never going to happen in one meeting. It will literally take you years to land
Years.
a big client.
Yep.
Years.
Yep.
And it's years of relationship building, years of um, putting in the time and the investment in that,
Hmm.
whether it's your own time, money. The other thing that I like to do with prospective clients is I try to send them like client alerts. So
Hmm.
if there's something new in the law that is going to affect their work, maybe you just send an email to this prospective client and say, hey, I'm not sure if you've heard, but there's this new rule that you might want to take a look at, and I know that it might affect you in X, Y, and Z. Or if, keep your door open. I mean, don't go working for free for too long, but
Right.
sometimes you just got to give. It's not
Yep.
always going to be every billable hour and every dollar that you make. I can tell you, I've landed some pretty big clients by just feeding them information over years and years
Hmm.
and years, until they feel like, okay, maybe it's in my best interest to work with this person long term.
Right.
Just start by the relationship building, I guess, is my advice. Don't think so much about, oh, how am I going to land
How am I
it?
going
You're
to
going
get
to
this
land it in
space?
a few years. You're not going to
Yes.
land it right away. So if
Right.
you're young and you're thinking, well, by the end of this year, I need to land this client, because they're bigger. We're talking
Hmm.
the option of just staying and make it work. The smaller stuff is easier,
Right.
because you can have little one-off cases. But maybe the better option is for you to work a smaller book and work your way
Hmm.
up into a bigger book, because the other direction of that, where you're going to go after a big, big, big client, for the firm to trust you to bring that work in, you have to be their star lawyer on that work,
Yep.
right? Like,
Absolutely.
just because you brought it in doesn't mean that they're going to even let you work
Let
on
you
it.
work on it. Exactly. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
there's different ways that firms comp attorneys for that. Sometimes they just don't comp them.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't even know, what are all the different examples of ways that compensation can be set up, but it's pretty diverse. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
there's no one process for it. So you just have to just kind of start. And then the other advice on that same note is just be really good at what you're given. There's so many young lawyers that they dream of this job.
Mm-hmm.
And in their mind, they're so caught up with what it looked like. And in
Mm-hmm.
reality, it just doesn't look like that off the bat. Everybody hopes that your dreams do come true later on in life. But the first couple of years of practicing, especially as a litigator, it's very grinding work.
Right. And you
I
just got to
grind
get good
now.
at it. Right.
Yeah, I
Right.
grind now. But like
Right.
even then, it was very grinding. And clients will respect you at getting really good at something,
Mm-hmm.
even if that good thing is not necessarily what they do, right? When you start having posts on social media and putting it out there that you're winning trials, that you've won an MSJ, that you settled a case where it was multi-million dollars exposure and you're able to sell it for a nominal amount, that's when, they're going to get all that on their feed.
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn is really important for that aspect. If your firm is not promoting your own work, promote your own work. Of
Promote it yourself.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course, with their permission, right? But promote it yourself. There's no reason for you not to do that. And between you cultivating those relationships over time, and then with you doing really good work, and then showing the people that you've cultivated the relationships with that you've done good work, the sky is the limit on being able to get work.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice, and you hit it on the head with just cultivating those relationships with with the current firm's clients, right? Just doing that, and it takes my mind back to one of my biggest clients. It took 10 years of meeting that client. It was the general counsel of an entertainment company, but every 6 months I would invite him for coffee at it was a coffee bean near Cedar Sinai. Every 6 months we would have a coffee talking about travel, talking about everything basically. And it took 10 years to land a piece of business. And people are like 10 years, no, but it was 10 years to be patient, number one, 10 years for them to see the arc of your career, 10 years to see, can she handle this business at this point? So I think you make a really good point about being patient as well, but also at the same time, you're building those relationships, cultivating those relationships, maintaining those relationships as well, and demonstrating your wins all the way along. So that's a really good insights there, very good insights. So you come across as extremely confident from the first moment I had a conversation on the phone with you. I'm like, wow, she's really confident. Um,
Oh man,
so
I know
have
what
you?
that means. That's okay.
I love it though. I love it. And I have you always been that way, or is that something you've had to build by nature of your work, or it's going to lead into our conversation about imposter syndrome, which I've been doing a lot of reading on recently. But tell me about your confidence. Like, where does it come from?
Definitely comes from my mother. Okay, my mother
Okay.
is 1,000 times more confident than me
Oh,
with
really?
just
Okay.
about everything. Yeah, I'm a very toned down version of that. Um, so I think I've always, for the most part, been pretty confident. I remember in like seventh grade, we all had to impersonate someone from history and give a
Mhm.
speech. And my teacher said, you know who you should be? And I don't even remember the name, but it was a very prominent woman who broke the space and prohibition of alcohol.
Mhm.
And she was very strong and very just like, passionate in the way that she communicated. And I didn't know that about this person until I started doing the research. And then, because I'm young, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's what they think of me, right? Like, that's what this teacher thinks of me. She thinks I'm like, putting the hammer down. That's something that's really stuck with me my entire life. Because I think it was in that pivotal moment that I kind of got a glimpse of how other people viewed the way that I came off.
Right.
And of course, I'm like, what, 12, 13 years old. So for,
Right.
whatever that means at that age. And I think it gave me a lot of confidence to, continue to I've been wanting to be a lawyer since I was a little girl. Being
Oh,
a
wow.
lawyer is something I've been saying since I was like 5.
Oh, I love
So
that.
I've
That's
always
great.
known I wanted to go to law school. There was no
Hmm.
doubt that I was going to go to law school. I never questioned it at all. Um, but then there were plenty of times during my career where the confidence level went down,
Hmm.
even more recently.
Yeah.
I've been put through a lot of trial and error in my
Hmm.
career,
Hmm.
and some of that error comes with a lot of emotion and doubts, and
Hmm.
you really kind of question yourself. I definitely have been told that I'm very confident,
Hmm.
especially in trial, and I can tell you that I am shaking in my boots. Like,
Right.
I am like,
Underneath.
you are crazy. I was so nervous.
Right.
Um, but there's something to be said about knowing your shit, and there's
Hmm.
something to be said about acting like you know it.
Right.
And
Even if you
especially
don't.
when, yep,
Okay.
somebody
Yeah.
asked me yesterday for some advice on trial work because they're doing their first trial as lead counsel. And I
Hmm.
said, you just got to go in there and you got to pretend like you know everything. And
Right.
when you get called out that you don't, everybody's going to forget about it in 2 minutes because you guys are all going to be moving on to the next massive issue, that is coming up in the trial.
Right.
There's just too much to deal with for people to sit there and ponder your abilities. Everything's just moving so fast.
Right.
So you just have to act confident.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because I read something yesterday about not allowing other people's judgments to paralyze you, and I think that we suffer from that as women, as BIPOC women as well. Just allowing other perspectives to paralyze us sometimes, right? So even creating that doubt that you're talking about as well, it happens. There are points in my career I felt super confident, and then other times where it's just like, oh my gosh, that imposter syndrome sort of seeps in as well. I'm your host, Erica Moore-Burton. As the president and founder of Round Hill Legal Search, I've spent over 2 decades connecting with incredible attorneys day in and day out. I decided it was high time that we share some of their remarkable stories, lessons, insights, and inspiration with the world. Join us weekly as we have wonderful conversations with our guests, or simply a session talking about some career tips, advice for you as you light your own legal career path. What sort of tools have you employed to get over? And I suppose you just spoke to one, right? Just not fake it till you make it, but just go in there, and if you don't know it, act like you do. But what are some of the other tools that you've employed to overcome that, lack of confidence, imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it?
Just being really in tune with what you do know, right? You've
Mm-hmm.
got to be super organized, particularly in a trial setting. I mean, I make my team write everything out from every
Mm-hmm.
date that we've ever filed something. And I think that when you show confidence in particular spaces, that will bleed into the areas where you don't show as much confidence. And
Got
you
it.
really want to make sure that you're like, let's say you're doing a trial with a male, for
Mm-hmm.
example, and you're a female. I've gone up to my male co-counsel and said, hey, I noticed that the judge is kind of looking at you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Is it okay if we switch seats?
Oh,
Right? I do that a lot, especially
yeah.
you can't really tell, but I'm 5 feet tall, so I'm little as
Oh,
it
you
is.
are. Okay.
Yeah. Right. And every time I've done a trial, it's always with somebody super tall. So it's
Right.
natural for the judge to kind of look at a tall man.
Right.
Um, and I've never had anybody say no,
Right.
especially because they're taller than me. Everybody can see them anyways. Just
Mm-hmm.
say, let me switch seats here so that I can set a different tone in this courtroom as to, what my
Optics. Yeah.
participation is going to be here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that will make me more confident. It will get the judge to hone in on what they need to hone on. So if you see yourself being kind of pushed to the side a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if a question is always being directed in another direction, right? And it's not you, don't think, oh my God, they don't like me, or, maybe they don't think I'm smart enough. No, you have
Mm-hmm.
to change the narrative on that. You've got to
Right.
identify it, talk to your team and say, okay, when we go back in, let me do the talking. I'm going to be sitting in the seat. Of course, please chime in, if you have something, to add or whatnot. But I think we need to change the dynamic. You have to stick up for yourself in that
Yeah.
respect.
Yeah. And I think it's easy for us as women to have that. We tell ourselves stories, right? We tell a story about whatever's happening, and it's always a negative story when it actually could be a positive story. So when we're telling those stories, instead of tell ourselves a different story, right? There's something else going on. There's there's a reason why he looked or said something in a particular way. Tell an empowering story when that doubt creeps in as well. Um, Talk to us a little bit about the, like, you are 10, 15 years in now to your career,
Almost
and
10.
you said you still have doubts sometimes, right? So
Oh,
somebody
yeah.
looking at you thinking, oh my God, you've got these great clients, you've been into trial how many times? How can you, Sabrina, be have doubts sometimes? How can you have doubts sometimes?
I think that a lot of it is based on one, self-esteem.
Yeah.
Just in general. I didn't grow up in a family of lawyers or anything like that. This is all pretty new to me in my family.
Hmm.
So I think that's a little bit scary. I also moved from the East Coast to California. That was a
Hmm.
very big change for me. At
What
a
prompted
very
that move, by the way? What prompted that move? Was that law school?
Yes, law school.
Okay, got
So
it.
it was really intense when I got into the area of law because I wasn't as comfortable with my environment as I was when I was living in New York or on the East
Hmm.
Coast. So that was, I think, big factors. But I also think there's societal factors, right? So
Right.
I want to just, if it's okay with you, read out a line that you actually provided to me about imposter syndrome, because
Yes.
when I read it, I said, oh my God, that could not feel more close to home than it did when I read it. It says,
Yeah.
they're talking about a study from Georgia State University about high achieving women, and it says they discovered that many of their female clients seemed unable to internalize and accept their achievements. Instead, in spite of objective data to the contrary, they attributed their successes to serendipity, luck, contacts, timing, charm, or the ability to appear more capable than they felt themselves. And when I read that, I said, oh my God, that is literally like my
Right.
life in a nutshell.
That's me. Oh my gosh.
My
Right.
life in a nutshell. And I can't tell you I mean, it has to be, Erica, in the thousands that I
Hmm.
have said out loud, I just got really lucky. Okay. I
Mm.
have said that
Wow.
so many times.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm now in
I just got
2024.
goosebumps, by the way.
Oh,
I
I
just
just
got
got
goosebumps.
goosebumps telling you that, right? It's
Right.
luck, it's timing.
Yeah.
It's, oh, you appear confident. It's not that you
Hmm.
are confident, it's because
Right.
you appear confident, right?
Right.
It's serendipity. It was just meant to be, right?
Right. The
It's
stars
none of that.
aligned for me. Right. What is it?
Yep.
Tell us what it is, Sabrina.
It's none of that. It is all you. And the
Yes.
universe will land in the way that it was meant to land, right?
Absolutely.
It's not about luck. It's not about timing. It's that it was meant to be like that
Yep.
because you put the work in and you got yourself there.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I must have said it in the thousands that my career was luck, and it wasn't that. And
Right.
it's really actually after 10 years is when I'm starting to realize that, right? I'm in a new chapter of my life. And I'm learning that my capabilities are much farther than I ever gave myself credit for. And it's
Right.
because I've been living this life believing that it was luck, that it was serendipity, that it was my
Hmm.
great charm, right?
Right.
It's just not like that. You've got to really give yourself more credit. And even in those chances of where it feels like luck, maybe you met the right person at the right
Hmm.
time, you've got to remember why you were at that place in the first place.
Right.
It's not about when you met them or how you met them.
Right. And it's about changing your language, right? You're talking about luck, changing your own language around it, right? No, I'm here because I've worked really hard, and I've worked hard for so many years and for so long, and that's what got me here. Versus, oh, it's just lucky, or it's just, we got to change the language around it. That quote that I sent you, it was from an article in the Harvard Business Review from last summer. And I just picked it up, and this article is just exploding with so many epiphanies for me because throughout my career, I've suffered from imposter syndrome. but it also, on the flip side, it talks about the dangers of imposter syndrome as well, and the fact that you can become a workaholic, right? Thus increasing your anxiety, stress levels because you're trying to overcompensate as well. There are times that we overwork, but also setting goals that are unrealistic for you to achieve, just so then it's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, I knew I wasn't good enough, but you've set these goals that are so unachievable that you're not able to reach them anyway. So then you fall into that imposter syndrome. You fall into that cycle.
That's exactly
Um,
right. Yep.
and I've certainly done that myself, and I've certainly just in the last, I would say, 5, 6 years, have started to change the language around it. No, I'm here because of the work that I have done and the continuous work. So I'm glad that that sort of resonated with you and you sort of picked that up about yourself. So that's a good thing. Um, let's shift gears a little bit. So there's a lot of talk about how are we doing for time? 55, good. There's a lot of talk about AI. I was on YouTube the other day and I was blown away because there was an ad that popped out and it said, if you've been involved in an accident, go on to this app that can be your own personal lawyer and just put in your accident and it can compare you against a million other claims, come up with your claim, and then it blew me away. How are you feeling about AI? What do you think the implications are for this new generation of practicing lawyers? Let's start with that.
Well, I'm glad you asked because I am a massive proponent of it. And I don't
Okay.
think that we should be running from it because you could run away from it as much as you want and it's still going to be there. There's
Yeah.
just no doubt about that. AI is here to stay. And the question is how do we work with it? I personally have used tools that are similar or can produce artificial intelligence
Hmm.
using my own work products. I'm a little fearful of the world of just whatever's out in the open internet.
Right.
But there's a lot of spaces where you can rely on your own work to help you generate similar work
Hmm.
and really cut down your time on how much you're having to deal with particular tasks.
Hmm.
I actually recently joined LTL as a managing partner. And one of the biggest reasons why I came to LTL is because some of the partners also founded a up and coming software called Legalmation
Hmm.
that utilizes AI that's being used in different areas of practice and whatnot. And I really felt it necessary to be more streamlined
Hmm.
in that area of work because I do think it is the new wave. And I just think that everybody should take time to maybe
Hmm.
take some classes on AI. There's a lot of free classes online. They may not be
Right.
worth MCLEs, but at the very least, if you can get into any kind of program that is
Hmm.
going to give you the basics of AI and the legal practice and what's to come from it and the ethics around it and what you have to look out for, learn
Hmm.
it now because
Right.
if you wait too long, you're gonna be chasing your tail for a while, and it's here to stay.
Right. So use AI to help you. Don't be afraid of it. Embrace it and see how it can enhance your practice. I was at lunch with somebody the other day, and they were saying that they used AI to create questions for voir dire. And I was like, oh, brilliant, right? And was able to spit out questions. They're not going to use every single question, or they're just going to use it just as an idea generator as well, which I think it's great for. And I've certainly used it a lot in recent weeks as well. Okay. We're gonna wrap up with Erica's fun five, and let's see, let's see. So, what's the best piece of advice that your mother or any other influential woman in your life has given you?
Be yourself. I know it's such a common theme, but if you're crying, you're crying. Who
Yeah.
cares? I was
Right.
recently listening to the podcast of the founder of Bumble,
Uh huh.
and she told me in the podcast
Right.
um, that she was a very different woman than what people expected from her when she walked into a room. And sometimes she would be very vulnerable, and
Yeah.
people wouldn't really know what to do. but you have to be yourself. And if being yourself is being vulnerable, your
Hmm.
team will appreciate you so much more than if you're
Yeah.
trying to put on an act.
Yeah.
Always goes back to people are just humans, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. I love that. I love that. Um, what's the most impactful book that you've ever read?
Impactful book that I've ever read. Um, I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm not a big reader. Maybe we can do a
Okay.
different question.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So, what's the best movie of all time?
This is gonna sound really cheesy, but my cousin Vinny is just about
Oh,
everything for me in my
yes.
life. So remember earlier I said when I was really young, I already knew I was gonna be a lawyer.
Right.
I'm almost sure that movie had such a big impact on me. Oh my God.
That's
There
great.
are aspects of that trial that I think about when I'm doing trial. It really, really, really do. And I just feel like for a lawyer, it is the best movie of all time because it's so genuine of exactly what we're talking about, right?
Right.
Is taking a leap of faith,
Mm-hmm.
being confident,
Mm-hmm.
being yourself,
Being human.
understanding where those boundaries can lie, where they end, right? Like
Right.
so many boundaries for that poor guy just ended, right? He was like from the minute of what he was wearing to the how he was talking. But then what did the judge say to him at the very end? He said, "Man, you might be unconventional, but you're one hell of a trial lawyer."
Mm,
Right? And that is like so
that's
big,
everything. Yeah.
particularly in my career, and what I've seen with other people, and so much of what we were talking about today. So, my cousin Vinny, that movie will never, ever, 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 ever get old.
Yeah. I have to go back and rewatch that one. It's been a while. So, what is one goal that you haven't accomplished yet, but that you want to before you expire?
I really want to find maybe not necessarily a hobby. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that is what I need to do is find
Right.
a hobby. What I really want to do is find another aspect in the legal community that I can really excel on that is not necessarily lawyer work.
Huh.
Yes,
Okay.
in my capacity as an attorney, of course, but I really want to teach one day,
Okay.
or maybe just go about my legal work in a different way. I've considered going into lobbying a little bit because
Oh, interesting.
yeah, because in my
Yeah.
area of law, it's very high volume, and so
Hmm.
much of it is because the law is just not in, like, it's too much in favor of one side.
Right.
So then it becomes heavily abused by the attorneys and the community and things like that. And, I can sit here until I'm blue in the face defending these cases. If the law is exactly the same, what am I doing?
Yeah. What are you
Right.
doing? Yeah. Yeah.
I think what I'm looking to achieve is something more than just day to day in litigation and trial work.
Hmm.
I definitely am not going to be giving that up anytime soon,
Right.
but you can have an impact on the law and the legal community in other ways. And
Absolutely.
that is one area that I haven't really fully been able to dedicate a lot of time to because I've been so busy with the litigation, the trial work, building my book of business.
Right.
I just surpassed one of my biggest goals was having working somewhere or working on work that is 100% self-originated and it
Hmm.
is not provided to me by
Congratulations, by
any
the way.
firm or something,
Yeah,
and I
that's huge.
appreciate that. I voiced that goal for the first time out loud probably about 6 months ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe how quickly it kind of came, right? But I persevered in
Hmm.
that mindset. And I think now the next step is, okay, now that I've kind of achieved the top of what I wanted,
Hmm.
how can I make an impact in the legal community outside of the courtroom?
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, last question for you. What's the song that gets you to the dance floor? Tell us a bit about Sabrina in your personal life. What do you listen to music? What's the if you do, what song gets you going?
Well, I listen to all kinds of music, and it does not take a lot for me to get going when it comes to music. But how about anytime I need like a boost of
Yeah.
energy or empowerment? There's a
Yeah.
song called Boss by the Carters, by
Oh.
Jay Z and Beyonce, and it's just so good. And sometimes, like, if I'm on my way to trial, I'll put that on. One time I was on my way to a photo shoot, and, I really wanted to make sure that I came off confident in the camera.
Uh-huh.
Or if I know that I'm going to be, going into something that maybe I don't feel so confident about, right? I try to put on that song. I love that song.
I love that song. I'm gonna listen to it afterwards and yeah, be reminded. I like to have like that power list, right? That's gonna go on the power list. I forgot about that one. Wonderful, Sabrina. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with me this today. Really enjoyed chatting with you. So many gems in there. I appreciate your time, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in and listening. I'm your host, Erica Moore Burton. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure that you share and subscribe to get new episodes as they come out. If you're an attorney looking for new opportunities, head to www.roundhillsearch.com to get in contact with one of our recruiting associates. And don't forget to send your career questions to podcast@roundhillsearch.com. Until next time.